It seems like every man and his dog in the media wants to talk about the upcoming off season, and I know there's Brownlow on tonight, but I can't help but think that there is still a grand final on this week, and that deserves to be spoken about as well. So here we are. That's what I'm going to do. I've collected some of my early thoughts, an early tip, and wanted to put them out there and see what you guys think. So that's all I really need to say in the open. Like the video if you like the video. Subscribe, join the Daz Talks Footy family, and here are my early thoughts on this year's grand final. Now, I will time code this. It's 9:15 on Monday morning. I think this is going to go out tonight, maybe, probably. But if the Lachie Neale decision's already been made, this becomes a moot point. But you have to get this out of the way early. I don't think you can wait until the Wednesday, the Thursday to make a decision on Lachie. I think you've got to go with it early, settle with your squad, all of those sorts of things. And look, Brisbane and teams in the past have gone in with injured players. I know there are going to be examples, and there are modern examples. Ben Reid is one of them. Sam Reid is another. There's a couple of other Sydney examples as well, where the injured players going into a grand final becomes a distraction. And then on the counterpoint of that, you've got Stevie J in 2011. You have got Nigel Lappin in 2003, I think it was, who recovered from the rib injury that he had, which was extraordinary. So you've got it, on both ends of the spectrum, and no one's going to go into a grand final fully 100% ready to go. Your body is battered, bruised, all of those sorts of things, but it's not a case of Lachie's age. I don't think it's a case also for his resume. Yes, he is a best 23 member. Yes, the midfield has looked pretty good without him. Although, the only time it didn't was when Hugh McCluggage was also shut down by Mullen, by the way. And there's every chance that that's going to happen again. You'd think it would, but I wonder how that will go. But at some point, hopefully today, or maybe even tomorrow being the Tuesday, we know, but more importantly, Brisbane know. They don't have to tell us, of course, whether Lachie Neale is going to be available. It has to be done quickly, I think. A double midfield tag would be rare, let's be honest. But Mullen or McCluggage worked so well, it would be strange if it didn't happen again. I know that Brisbane got the preview in the first final, but I said it after the Brisbane and Collingwood review, is that Hugh McCluggage has had 14 disposals in that first final, and he's had 70 combined in the other two. He's been extraordinary. So what does Mark O'Connor do? Is it a case of going to Ashcroft? Is it a case of sort of trying to take Dunkley out of the game? Although that doesn't make much sense, because you'd think Dunkley would be trying to shut down one of the other Cats midfielders. Is the answer a little bit of a reversal of what happened against the Hawks, where Tom Atkins went up against Newcombe and then Mullen went to Nick Watson? So could you try and do the same, but with O'Connor? Could Mark O'Connor go and shut down Zac Bailey as that bigger-bodied, hybrid half-forward type? O'Connor is not the worst distributor off half-back and could definitely be a net positive with ball in hand. He doesn't need the ball in hand all that much, but Bailey over his three finals. Last week he had 21 and kick 2 against the Pies, 16 and 3 against the Suns, and was one of Brisbane's best with 27 at 82%, 7 score involvements and 6 clearances against the Pies. His first half, he was basically non-existent, helped turn the game in the third quarter. That might be something that you can look at, but in terms of getting Brisbane off to a good start, Bailey's first quarters across these finals as the All-Australian have been exemplary, and I think it's something they could do in the granny. Apart from the statistical improvement that Danger had from the first week of the finals to the third, having 19 versus 31 disposals, what was interesting is that his offensive heat map actually was brighter against the Hawks, with 75% of his disposals occurring in the front half of the ground. He played the quintessential midfield forward bull, and I wonder just what balance he is going to have in this granny. Of course, if he plays anywhere near what he did in the prelim final, he can probably put his name on the Norm Smith medal at 35 years old, which is just nuts in his 360th game, which is even more crazy. But what's going to be interesting is that he's just not the guy you're going to tag, which is going to make him so difficult to stop, because you may go to Holmes, you may go to Smith, and I just think Danger on a tagger, like if it is Dunkley, for example, Dunkley at full forward, or full back for him it would be, is a nightmare matchup. I just don't know whether that's going to be feasible or not. Maybe the aim is for Danger to be that 24 and a goal type of role. Of course, if he could, have a genie, you'd give him just the prelim final performance again. Why wouldn't you? That makes every ounce of sense. But being able to watch what Danger does, especially when Brisbane have a little bit of momentum, and you'd think they're going to have some of it, especially early in the game, you would think. Geelong have gone off to a slow start in a couple of finals. Does not mean anything bad, guys. As we know, they have taken the piss in both finals, combined 68-point margin across the two. So that's not a slight on them at all. But if Brisbane managed to garner themselves some momentum in the game, watching Danger maybe go from a slightly more forward passive role back to that midfield bull is going to be interesting. I think it is a fair statement to say that he is not going to be the 31-3 guy, but I would be stunned if he isn't given the leash, the reins, and more importantly, the opportunities to go and get 25. And of course, he's going to be a threat up forward outside of Jeremy Cameron and Shannon Neale, because he is equally as intimidating as a defensive prospect in the air and on the ground. Who's going to take him? Because if Gardner's on Neale and Andrews is on Cameron, or even if that's flipped, and I hazard a guess that Gardner would probably follow Jeremy Cameron up the field a little bit, Ryan Lester, Brandon Starcevic on Danger, because it's not going to be Wilmot or Fletcher, unless I'm missing someone just really obvious off the top of my head. Ain't going to be Danes Orgo. It's going to be interesting to watch. What's kind of bonkers through these finals is that these two teams score or want to score in ridiculously different ways. I'll show you the more traditional score sources from Brisbane, and if you're not watching, I can just read it to you, it's fine. But they've scored 107 points from 32 scoring shots from stoppage, which has made up about 40% of how they've scored 153 points from 38 scoring shots on turnover, which is equated to 56% of their score, and then 2 goals from kick-ins, which is about 5%. You're looking at a pretty even split, 31 to 38 scoring shots from the defensive to forward half. And then you've got 5 scores from centre bounce, that being 2 goals 3. Whilst there are some inaccuracies there, Brisbane are clearly bringing a balanced approach to the way that they want to score, considering, like I said, that 32 to 38 scoring shot split. Turnover, more teams score from turnover than stoppage. That makes sense. It's obviously not a big difference, being 6, but that's still pretty important, I feel. And then, of course, you've got the 32 to 38 split again, 31 to 38 split, I should say, from defensive half to forward half. The interesting notion about that, though, is that Brisbane want to control uncontested marks. They've won the uncontested marks pretty much all year, let's be honest. One of the better uncontested marking teams in the competition. So the fact that they are not more level in terms of forward to defensive half is really interesting. The score, of course, is going to be relatively different because it comes down to your ability to execute in front of goals. So the fact that it's 18-13 to 20-18 is not that big of a deal, but the fact that it is only 5 scoring shots the difference is very interesting and going to be something to watch. I don't think they're going to have to rely on a full ground uncontested style of play in order to try and score if they're at their best. And of course, the loss of Tom Stewart is going to be massive for the Cats. But what it looks like from the Cats is really interesting as well, because whilst they do want to score from turnover, of course, the defensive to forward half discrepancy is mind-boggling. So in their 2 finals so far, it's 32 to 30 in terms of scoring shots from stoppage to turnover. So more scoring shots from stoppage is actually batshit and something you very rarely see in the competition nowadays. And the fact that that's ahead means that this genuinely is going to be a midfield battle between the two. There is no better midfield than Brisbane's with or without Lachie Neale depth-wise. But again, Mullen takes out McCluggage, and that's how you're going to be able to try and make this happen. They haven't scored from a kick in at all, so that's obviously not counted in the stats there. And then defensive half, they've scored 18 times versus 33 in the forward half. So if they are winning the ball in the back half, they're struggling to take it, or maybe they don't need to. Of course, later in games, they could just shut it down, which they were able to do really well against Brisbane, more so than the Hawks, actually, because they piled on the pain a little bit in that final quarter against the Hawks. But those differences are incredible. And considering that the centre bounce, again, is just not taking it from the defensive half either, as we know, there's an extra 11 there. Now, 4 goals 7, of course, is not the greatest realm of accuracy there. But the fact that the Cats are going to look at the Lions and go, we're not going to let you get it in your forward half, and we want to put your 666 under an abundance of pressure, leads me to believe a little bit that if this game was being played 10 times, the brutality of the way that Geelong want to move the ball forward has me thinking, yeah, maybe they do win this 6 times out of 10. They probably do, which is nuts. Now, is one of those 6 what we're going to get on Saturday? Well, who freaking knows? I love Ollie Dempsey as a player. I love the fact that he can play an unaccountable wing role because of how good Geelong set up behind the ball. I love the fact that he's able to be an offensive weapon. I love the fact that next year there is a chance that he and Josh Weddle are going to be the All-Australian wingers, which just saying that out loud would be incredible to watch for both, obviously, Weds, but Ollie being rewarded for being a genuine winger who is continually dominant, even if it's just in his field position. The amount of uncontested scoring opportunities he gets by his opposition just not being accountable for him is extraordinary, and he deserves a lot of credit for that. No one had more of the footy in the qualifying final for the Cats than Dempsey did. He kicked 3 goals, had 9 score involvements, took 6 marks, and still had a 48-52 split in terms of his disposal heat map. So the fact is, he's not just getting forward and going, well, this is where I sit now. I'm basically a winger that goes to high half forward and the defense can sort themselves out. He's still working his tail off to get behind the ball. And without Jared Berry, maybe at his best because of his shoulder, and I know he's dislocated it before and it's been okay and it's got him through. Berry is 1-1 in grand final performances. He wasn't great in 23. He was excellent last year. That's going to be a matchup to watch in a very big way. Pumped to see how it plays out. And he might be a little bit of a smoky for the norm, is Ollie. But let's continue that part of the conversation. Now, I'm going to bring a lot of names to the table, and I think the 2 tiers for both teams are not going to be any names that surprise anyone. So you've got your Max Holmes, Bailey Smith, Danger, Jeremy Cameron, not necessarily in that order, just the way that I wrote them down. Gryan Miers, Ollie Dempsey, Sean Manor, and Tom Atkins is the tier 2 for me. Now, you might be thinking, Daz, there are some names here that you have obviously missed, and that's absolutely fine. I'm not saying it has to be one of these guys if Geelong win the game or to win the norm itself, because you got guys like Atkins who maybe might go a little bit underrated, but in such a heated midfield battle could accelerate himself forward. I think the cleverness of Sean Manor is, could it be a guy that has maybe 16 and 4 goals, end up being a Norm Smith medalist, a Bobby Hill-esque style? Would be really fun to watch. Like, yes, you've got Ashcroft that won it, Dusty won 3, Petrarca. I know all of these guys that have done it before, but with Isaac Smith, with Bobby Hill, like, we do have some proof now that some non-midfielders can go and win the award in more modern times. Jason Johannisen in 2016, regardless of you think of the legitimacy of that award, a halfback flanker did get it as well. So maybe a more offensive, potent threat might get the job done, and 3 out of the 4 for tier 2 for the Cats belong there. I think that's really interesting, and if there's anyone you think I've missed for the Cats, of course, comment below and let me know. And of course, if Hugh McCluggage maybe doesn't get tagged or can beat the tag, that would help him, but Dunkley, Ashcroft, Zorko, I think those 4 stand alone if Lachie Neale doesn't play. And then, of course, you look at those impact players that can get involved as well. You've got your Bailey, your Rayner, your Wilmot, your Fletcher, and then you Harris Andrews if you want to go down the Brian Lake path, which he could absolutely do as well. Both of these sides have got the ability to have your consistent 4-quarter performers that take it to another level and have got enough X factor to separate themselves from the pack, which I think makes this a really exciting game to watch. In terms of who I'll be putting some dollary dues on, I honestly think as the smoky for Brisbane, it is Darcy Wilmot, and I'm going to talk about him a little bit later on. For the Cats, I do like Sean Manor, again, as that smoky player. Both of my backlights have gone out, but that's okay. It's getting a little more intimate here. And then in terms of your stars or the players you would expect to get it done, I think the run and gun style of Max Holmes would lead him to favoritism for mine for the Cats. And then for Brisbane, yes, Ashcroft has won it before, but with no Neale there, I just think that Josh Dunkley's impact might be a little bit too strong. But hey, plenty of options here, and I'd love to know what yours are. And like a beautiful panna cotta, the consistency is key, and Darcy Wilmot expresses that in a massive way. He's averaging 25 disposals, had 75 across his 3 games that went 24, 26, and 25, which is low-key extraordinary. It's 75, 89, and 80% efficiency. He has been top 10 in the player rankings for Brisbane in all 3 games. That semi-final performance was extraordinary from Darcy. And again, he is going to be a guy that's going to be hard to shut down. Out of all the Brisbane players you want to take out of the game, you're going to take down Darcy Wilmot. His finals record, even outside of this year, has been really good. I thought he was more than okay in last year's grand final. The ton is on, so if he can get to 100, that would be pretty sick, I think, for a halfback flanker that at the time of him being drafted was seen by some, I think it was at Fox that I was watching at the time, as a reach. Well, it's fair to say that has aged like milk, and I love the way that Darce goes about it. Nigel Lappin's number 44 is in extraordinarily good hands. And outside of the Bailey-Rayner combination that I've spoken about, and probably didn't talk about Kai Lohmann enough as well, who was also very good. Archie was very good last year as well. And then for Geelong, like I said, forward of the ball, you've got Cameron, you've got Neale, you've got Dangerfield, and I've touched on Sean Manor a bit throughout the video as well. Going to be pretty hard to forget Gryan Miers, by the way, whose 2 finals have just slipped under the radar beautifully, I think. 17 disposals, 19, I should say, sorry. 7 marks, 5 tackles at nearly 80%, 23 pressure acts, 50% defensive time on ground, so that is his true high half-forward role. And he was the number 9 player on the ground qualifying final, and then 27 at 93% against my Hawks. 6 intercepts, so working his way up the ground as well. 14 score involvements, 21 pressure acts, 402 metres gained, and was the second highest rated player on the ground, of course, behind Danger. This man is a freak. But what about his kicking style? Look, as someone that grew up watching Matt Suckling, like having a guy with a different kicking action is fine. He is a beautiful user. His misses are only going to look uglier because of the kicking style, but it's not as if he's having more of them than your average player. And by the interview after, I think it was last week's game as well, ridiculously good sense of humor. And the older that I get, and the more I prioritize kindness in assessing people, which I think we all need to do, it's starting to annoy me just how many Geelong blokes just seem like good blokes, which is something as a teenager I did not care about at all because it was Geelong, and I hate them. I still do. It's just bugging me how good some of their blokes are. Some of them don't seem to be. Gryan, though, looks like one of the absolute beauties, which again, as a Hawks fan, still sucks to say. In 2000, the top 8 final structure changed and the double chance system that we know it to be now was introduced. This will, of course, be the 26th iteration of that finals. And this is going to be the 6th time that 2 teams have met in the same final series. Of course, playing off in the qualifying final and then one of the teams coming back to get the rematch in the granny. And what is so weird about the 5 results that we have for both, West Coast have been involved in 4 of them. It's kind of coincidental that in all 4 of their grand finals, they feature on this list, of course, in the 21st century, not counting 91, 92, and 94. So, when were they, in case you don't know? Well, in 2018, the Eagles defeated the Pies over in WA by 2.5 kicks, and then, of course, the Dom Sheed goal. The Eagles smacked the Hawks by 5.5 goals in 2015 before the Hawks got their revenge by 7.5 goals in 2015. In 2006, the Swans won by a point, so the Eagles decided to break their hearts and win by a point. In 2005, the Eagles won by 4. The Swans got their revenge and won by 4 in that as well. And the only one that didn't feature the Eagles, the Pies won the first qualifying final against Brisbane in 2003 by 2.5 goals. What does this mean? Well, considering that of those 5 final series, that it is 4-1 for the team that lost the first one, I think a lot of people should be really happy about that if you are hoping that Geelong lose the game. And the second thing that is to note, what's really interesting here is that it was Dennis Pagan, I think it was, who said, I would rather be down at halftime in a grand final because you can make some moves. Your flexibility opens up because there's no tomorrow. There is almost an anxiety about being rigid if you're ahead at halftime because you don't want to mess with the mojo. I just wonder whether it is the case historically from a holistic game point of view. Geelong have already beaten Brisbane, and clearly the margin doesn't matter. Now, granted, that 32-point margin that the Eagles had over the Hawks in 2015 was the biggest margin out of all of the games we mentioned. But Brisbane now have got the ability to say, what do we need to fix? And it just might bring in a little bit more funny business than Geelong saying, well, what do we do the same? Doubling down, how well is that going to work out for us? It's hard to say. Does history have an effect on right now? We have no idea. But it's a really interesting thought exercise that it is that 4-1 swing. And I do think Brisbane, Chris Fagan especially, has got the chance to throw a spanner in the works. For example, could McCluggage start on a wing and Cam Rayner be at the first centre bounce with Ashcroft and Dunkley? Is there a chance that Jasper Fletcher goes back to a wing to go one-on-one with Ollie Dempsey, as we spoke about earlier? I think Brisbane's ability to maybe want to do a move like that, it doesn't have to be either of the two that I suggested, is going to be easier to do than Geelong go, look, I know we won by 6.5 goals, but I think if we tinker with this, it'll get even better. I think there might be some rigidness. Now, Chris Scott is anything but rigid, as we know, and it's definitely going to be a system versus system kind of grand final. But geez, I'm going to be interested to see just what Brisbane do differently, especially early in this game. They did play 4 finals last year. They certainly don't look like they've run out of petrol tickets, so I don't know how much of an effect the 4 versus 3 finals is going to have. It clearly didn't have that much effect on Sydney last year. So I'm curious to see how tactically Brisbane try to differentiate themselves to reverse that result. So there's some of my thoughts, guys, going in. Let me know what you think. Comment below. Let me know. Like the video if you like the video. Subscribe. Join the Daz Talks Footy family. There will be 1 extra video, maybe 2, depending on how the Brownlow goes, coming this week before the grand final comes. My reaction will not be from here. I will be at my partner's brother's house, so the setup's going to look a little bit differently. It might not look perfect, but hopefully you can get around that as well. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I really appreciate all of your support throughout the final series and throughout the year as well. See you in the next video. Goodbye.